allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, before we get going, I'd like to ask for a moment of silence for a couple old, long-time town meeting members who have just passed away in the last couple weeks, Mable, Nevins, and Paulsen. If you could, a minute of silence, please. Oh, hush. You know, I don't hear from my brother in 2 months, and he picks now to call. There's a couple other things that I need to bring up. One of them is that we're losing a town meeting member who has resigned after 30 years. Shari Ellis decided not to rerun. So, Shari, wherever you are, thank you for your
Right on the aisle.
for 30 years of experience. And there's another announcement that really breaks my heart to have to make, but this is Amy's last town meeting. And if you want to know how good she is, wait till May.
What?
But she's been my right hand for my 8 years plus, and she does a great job, and I will certainly miss her. Okay, I want to remind people of seating rules. Town meeting members in this section and this section, if you want your vote to count. If you're outside those, you're outside my vision range, so you need to be in those two sections. Town residents can be over here or in these first few rows over here, and we have the town staff, et cetera, other elected boards over on the right-hand side, or my right, your left. Okay, there's some housekeeping motions that will apply to this meeting and any additional meetings until we finally adjourn. So the moderator would entertain a motion to allow members to attend virtually per the ADA, to name Bruce Warren as a deputy moderator, adjourn until Wednesday, January 29th at 7 o'clock if we do not finish our business tonight, and allow voting by raising hand instead of standing. Do I hear such a motion? Second? All in favor?
You have to stand.
Not until you pass this. Thank you. All opposed? Motion carries. Next time you can just raise your hand. Let me thank our help before I forget. We have Joanne Joanne, I'm going to butcher your name, Nizkobar, is that correct or close? KJ, Benjamin Peters, and Ali Wisniewski, And our sound engineer, Eric Kilburn. Thank you, folks, for your help tonight. And I think that's all I have to say. Under general articles, we have 2 reports. One of them, first one will be from the electronic voting ad hoc committee. Back in September, you requested that I appoint such a committee of 7 people. It was my choice of either 4 town meeting members or 3 and me. I opted to stay out of it. So as you know, since most of you know my opinion on it, I decided to stay away from influencing the issue. So we had 4 town meeting members. Roger Riggs as representative Ways and Means, and assistance from both IT and town clerk's office. So, Mr. Riggs.
Good evening. I think Bill already covered how it is that this committee got created. Basically, the charter was to look at electronic voting and see how we could add value to our town meeting situation here. Committee members, myself, Amy Warfield, Joe Bjorn, sorry, butchered your name. Dan Collins, Christine Kim, Dave Van Camp, and Dave Rodilla. We met a couple of times a week through December and January to look at all sides of this and come to some recommendation. Within town meeting, we basically, based on the bylaws, we have a very open and transparent process. There's no secret voting. A big part of the community is the discussion that happens. We count the votes, the moderator makes a judgment, and we want to do it fairly expeditiously because we want to focus on the discussion and the rationale for doing various things. And of course, we need to make sure that the voting is recorded correctly and we get good accuracy, both for our own purposes and the Attorney General, who is looking over the shoulder of everybody who does voting. So with electronic voting, with clickers, there's typically a little device like this that has a few buttons for voting yay or nay. The results, there's a computer system behind the thing that can tally the votes and display them. There are provisions in most of the systems to be able to put the names up on the screen so we can see we can see who's voted how, which is important in part of our transparency, both locally or in person and remotely. And the computer system can record the votes individually or just the aggregate, up or down vote or 2/3 vote. And all the systems also support, counted votes and roll call votes. In terms of the vendors and the products that are out there to do the job, there are multiple vendors. There's at least 3 or 4. We looked at 3 in some detail. Many of them also have both options to lease the equipment and the systems or to buy and operate them yourselves. They also, most of them provide the option to do remote voting, not just the clickers would work for in the room, usually using some kind of personal device or a web browser. The vendors also will, for a fee, come and operate the voting system. So they'll take care of the setup and handing out the devices and checking batteries and all of the sort of overhead of that. And so that's one aspect that always takes extra staff and manpower. And they all support both representative town meeting like Burlington's. Across Massachusetts, there are many towns that already use electronic voting, many for just in-person meetings and open town meetings. So an open town meeting, any resident of the town, any voter in the town can come to town meetings. So there's a very large range of people who attend, and the electronic voting in that case, the clickers really make it easy to deal with a large number of people voting. Acton and Chelmsford are 2 examples of this, and there are many others. For representative town meetings, Lexington and Billerica have adopted this kind of electronic voting as well. And a few towns run hybrid town meetings with electronic voting. In particular, we looked at Plymouth. So our sort of top-level conclusion was that the electronic voting is well established and has a good track record. We did a rough estimate of the cost, and it's pretty expensive in terms of the staffing that's required and the equipment, between $50,000 and $75,000 per year. It's, you know, it's like $5,000 per meeting. You have to resolve exactly how and when electronic voting is used to figure out a more detailed cost. So one of our conclusions was that for in-person meetings like this, the benefit does not justify the cost. It's just we're pretty good at raising our hands and being counted in person. For hybrid meetings, if quite a number of people are hybrid, for hybrid meetings, you really need the electronic voting to get the votes counted efficiently. And we'll see a little bit more of that in a minute. It's just not effective to deal with local and remote without a system. So just a little more detail on the voting. You know, today, everybody's familiar with what we do here: raise our hands, stand, and be counted, or roll call. In the case where we would not have electronic voting, and we've done a couple of town meetings through WebEx, so you've seen some of that in action, there is no effective way for the moderator to judge the remote votes and the local votes in the simplest kind of vote, which is just up or down, you know, more yays than nays or vice versa. So in that situation without electronic voting support, every vote becomes a counted vote, where they have to count what's in the room, you have to count what's on the remote, add them up, and then decide what the moderator decides what the outcome is. If you get an electronic voting system, then pretty much all the voting takes the same amount of time, whether it's local or remote. The system tallies the votes, and you know the answer becomes pretty ready pretty quickly. So the overall recommendation, given the time that we had to work on this, we weren't able to drill down to a great deal of detail, but we think there's more work to be done on a bunch of aspects here. Probably another committee is needed to work through all of the aspects that are listed here. We did talk a bit about the home rule petition and the changes to the bylaws that would also need to go to the state as part of a home rule petition and be synchronized with the accessible voting that was voted on in September. They need to be aligned and paired up. So the things that the new committee would need to consider in more detail are the wording of the bylaw, vendor selection. There are choices between different vendors, the equipment, and the kind of support that they have. Particularly looking at the costs and see how it works out. And then there's a bunch of operational procedures in the way that the clerk uses it, and the additional staff needed to run the voting system that need to be worked out. And the technology support, either through our IT or by paying additional staff to come in and help. And then another important piece of it is the initial and ongoing training of the membership to use the system efficiently and correctly. And we think that committee should end up bringing warrants to town meeting to accomplish that goal. So we don't yet have a concrete proposal for the committee. I think the next action is for the body to express an opinion, not here tonight, because this is just a report about how to proceed and when to proceed. If you have questions, ask me or any of the committee members or the moderator, and we'll see how it goes forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roger. And actually, I wanted to mention there was a few other people, 3 or 4 people, who also volunteered. And I wanted to thank you for volunteering. Your name just didn't come out of the hat when I decided who was going to be on the committee. Everyone was qualified. Now we will hear see and hear a video from the High School Building Committee. Mrs. Bond.
Thank you. I see better with him off. Eric's up here. Last time he played Vanna, sort of, but this time he's just here to support. So anyway, in September of 2024, the BHS Building Committee showed you our first of a series of videos about the process and progress of the feasibility study. The building committee has been working with Doran Whittier as the owner's project manager and Taipei Architects to perform the feasibility study. This team has been hard at work since that time. April through June, we held visionary workshops. These workshops involved teachers, administration, students, and parents. The workshops provided a list of priorities and considerations which helped direct the building committee to design building options. We were presented with over 10 options to review as a result. Our working groups have been meeting continuously as well. The video you are about to see will provide you with information on what we have accomplished so far and provide information on the 5 options that have been selected to advance to the preliminary schematic report phase. The building committee, working with both Taipei, Doran Whittier, town committees, the general public, will ultimately identify a preferred option. We expect to complete this exercise in the spring of 2025. The preferred option will also include a detailed estimate, very similar to what was presented to town meeting for the police station this past spring, where funding was appropriated for the building of the new station. Please enjoy the video. That's if I can get it to work. There we go. Here we go.
Welcome to the 3rd video in the Burlington High School Feasibility Study series. The previous video explored the existing conditions of the current high school building and its deficiencies in space and programming. In this video, we will provide an overview of how the options were developed with the project team and stakeholders. We will describe the major categories of options and show the initial general approach to each of them. And we will explain why several approaches have already been eliminated as viable options. As we move forward, it's important to note that this video will only provide an overview of this information. To learn more, please see the PDP report available on the project website. In developing and assessing these options, the following goals were kept in mind: to allow the realization of the district's educational program, to create spaces that provide flexibility in technology that will accommodate future changes in education, as well as collaborative and team-based learning, to keep cost in mind, making sure that it's sustainable and considers both initial construction cost and long-term life cycle costs, to limit disruption to existing operations and teaching and learning during construction, to create building designs that will support the community programs and community entities that are currently housed in the Burlington High School, to improve vehicular traffic and parking, to provide natural light in all classrooms and laboratories and consider green space and opportunities for outdoor learning, and to retain the existing gymnasiums and auditorium or provide equivalent spaces in a new design. The process for developing the options to date have included 3 visioning sessions held with school faculty, staff, and administration, as well as parents, students, and residents. These sessions were facilitated by David Stephen of New Vista Design. Meetings were also held with the superintendent and Burlington High School principal, and conversations with community members at the Town Center Beer Garden and local Business Fest also informed goals for this project. Presentations to the Burlington School Building Committee were part of this process as well. When considering what's best for the high school, there are categories of options. The first category is to upgrade and renovate the existing building. This approach is code compliance upgrades only, including energy, accessibility, and life safety. Scope may include roof or window replacement, but would definitely include mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and fire protection systems replacement, and accessibility upgrades. It is assumed that this option would require temporary modular swing space during construction. The second option is a renovation and expansion of the existing building. 5 options have been explored to possibly renovate and expand the current building and can be explored in detail in the PDP on the project website. Generally, the strategies involve removing certain underperforming portions of the structure while maintaining the larger areas, like the gymnasiums, cafeteria, and select classroom wings. New large additions would connect to renovated and reprogrammed areas with efficient layouts to provide modern amenities, satisfying the project goals. The third option would be a new construction and complete replacement of the existing school. 5 options have been explored for a new building on the existing high school property, with varying locations and project details. With all new options, the phasing and logistics associated with the replacement school are much more fluid than a renovation. This would result in a shorter construction duration and less disruption to students and existing operations during construction. Multiple locations have been explored as viable for a new construction school, including the current student parking lot and the existing track and field. Depending on the options, each of which can be explored in more detail in the PDP on the project website. A new multi-story building provides all new academic spaces and state-of-the-art learning environments, with varying options to include community programming or retention of the select building elements from the existing school in the plan. The fourth option explored was that of an alternative site. Late in the PDP phase, a single site in the town arose as an available option and possible alternate location for a replacement school. This option explored the possibility of utilizing a neighboring building for the high school core academic program. The design team met with the owners of the vacant 3-story office and laboratory space and evaluated the engineer's drawings. While the building was essentially a shell and ready for development, it was roughly half the size needed for the designated programming. There were also significant traffic concerns and connectivity issues to the existing school site and facilities, as the building is located across a state highway. The alternative site option was eliminated by the school building committee in January of 2025, following the submission of the PDP report. This option was removed due to the cost of the purchase and retrofitting of the building to make ready for a learning environment, a lack of necessary space, and proximity to other school facilities. 5 other options were presented to the school building committee on October 10th and were also eliminated. These approaches require lengthy project timelines and temporary off-site swing space for the entire student population and faculty, which the town cannot support. These options can be viewed on the project website under PDP Appendix D. During the next phase of the study, called the PSR, or Preferred Schematic Report phase, the design team, along with the district, will continue to evaluate the cost and scope of each option. Current estimates place a renovation-only project at around $330 million. An addition renovation option would cost between $271 and $313 million. A new construction project would cost anywhere from $311 to $347 million, depending on the approach. The desire to relocate community programs in proximity to the high school will also be evaluated during this phase. This will further inform the selection and schematic development of the new construction replacement options. The project team will continue to work with the town to narrow down the options of all major approaches in order to further develop the selected options. To stay current with the most up-to-date information and for news and opportunities to add your voice to the discussion, including upcoming building tours and community forums, please visit the project website at bhsbuildingproject.com.
Okay, I X'd out Amy. All right. As chair of the Burlington High School Building Committee, I want to thank town meeting again for the $1.5 million to perform the feasibility study. I also want to thank the High School Building Committee and the Burlington High School educators, students, and the community members for the many hours of time given to this important project. We are making great progress and look forward to providing regular updates to town meeting and all town boards. Again, please visit the www.bhsbuildingproject.com for the most up-to-date information. The next community forum is February 12th from 6:30 to 8:30 in this auditorium. I hope to see you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Bond. Now let's us move on to to our business, starting with Article number 2. It has been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee. And to see if the town will vote to amend zoning bylaws by adding a new zoning district entitled Mixed Use Innovation District. The article is as printed in the warrant. We will start off with a presentation from our Development Director, Mr. Toklas. Oh, excuse me, hold on, that's right. I wanted Town Council to explain the voting on these four articles.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator and members of the town meeting. So there are 4 articles that entail the mixed-use innovation district, Articles 2, 3, 4, and 5.
What, Monty?
There is feedback in the microphone, and it makes it hard to understand.
He's working on it.
We're working on it.
Oh, you're working, okay.
So Articles 2, 3, 4, and 5 are part of the mixed-use innovation district. As you know, in my cover letter to the town meeting, Articles 2, 4, and 5 only require a simple majority vote. And the reason is that they fall under the new provisions of Chapter 40A, Section 5, the Housing Choice Programs, which only require a simple majority vote. So then the question becomes, if the changes to the use table, Article 3, are part of that, why doesn't that also fall under the same provisions? And the answer is that the use table actually, the changes in the use table actually entail more than just the changes in the mixed-use innovation district. Not dramatically, but they do. And so there are 3 new uses in the use table. There is the dwelling townhouse row house new use. There's the mixed-use building new use, and then pickleball was added as another descriptor for tennis, because we all want to talk about pickleball. So the mixed-use building definition includes that as a special permit in another district and has no in other districts. And under the Housing Choice Program, you can't combine those and still use a simple majority. But the purpose of those changes in the use table is to make it consistent with the mixed-use innovation district. And so then the next question is, if the others pass and the use table doesn't pass, they're going to have to come back to the town meeting at the next town meeting, assuming there's a positive vote from the planning board, to have the zoning use table changed, because the 3 other articles won't be effective without the use table changing. I hope that clarifies it.
Any questions on that? Okay. Ms. Toklas, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and thank you, town meeting, for your time this evening. As many of you know, my name is Melissa Tintoklis, and I work as the Economic Development Director for the town. I'm going to load up this presentation. And one moment. So as many of you already know, my role and my job for the town is Economic Development Director. And it's my job to support businesses and to strengthen our economic sector, regardless, small business, large business, across the board. That is my job. And I do this a couple different ways. I work on short-term initiatives such as planning, such as permitting, organizing events that we know of, such as the beer garden, which is bringing fresh foot traffic and interest to our small businesses in the town center. But I also work on long-range and long-term initiatives. And those are what I kind of call the invisible kind of policy work. And this is really to set us up and look into the future to understand what's coming at us and how we can best prepare to stay robust, relevant, and competitive as we move into the future. So tonight I'm here to talk about the Mixed Use Initiative, or Mixed Use Innovation District, which is one of these initiatives. I'm going to move this forward. The area that we're talking about for this new zoning district is down here in the south corner of Burlington. It's about 16 parcels at the intersection of Mall Road and Middlesex Turnpike. You may see it on this picture a little better. The majority of it is the Mall Road. It includes Kohl's as well as the Burlington Square and Burlington Marketplace. And the zoning that we're talking about tonight that we'll be discussing in more detail is really about a shift in thinking about how this space works. It's about shifting from the 1960s when we were looking at a car-centric, single-use environment to now a live, work, play environment. And we're doing this because we're trying to promote vibrancy. The idea is that we are bringing in new investment on our terms. So many of you have contributed to this proposal here tonight. We've been working on it for a little over 2 years. And this proposal in particular incorporates not only kind of the vision and direction that allows flexibility for property owners and new development, but we're building in important aspects such as open space, public realm to enhance this area, not just for one developer's perspective or project, but for our community as we want to move into the future. And we know we have to do that by building in some of the development capacity, but we can set up special guardrails and put incentives in place so that we can also benefit from any new growth that comes out of this area. So this is another picture to explain a little bit what we're talking about, because in a lot of ways, I brought this picture in because in a lot of ways, our zoning is going to be really targeting this area. We want to strengthen the existing commercial, and we want to use it by using strategic infill in this area. So let me talk a little bit about why we're even doing this, right? Let's kind of step back a bit before we get into the details of the proposal. We know that the whole entire commercial district for Burlington is extremely important for us. It brings jobs, amazing innovation that comes out of here, as well for us, a significant amount of tax revenue. And that is important for us on a very basic level. When we have strong commercial and the tax revenue from that is strong, that helps offset our residential taxes, the bills that we have to pay for our home. And Ways and Means knows this. This is a chart from Ways and Means. They're also looking at the future. They are making assumptions 10 years from now, how we're going to pay for not only the Fox Hill and the police department that we've approved, but for what our school committee is looking forward to doing is the high school. How are we going to pay for that? We are building assumptions on growth from the commercial, assumptions from value on the commercial. But our commercial is facing challenges. And I say that because, again, my job for Burlington is to look to the future, understand the patterns, and better give you, town meeting, town administration, planning board, options and proposals to best prepare us to withstand that. So the way I've categorized kind of the challenges ahead of us are in these 3 categories. economic challenges, changing preferences, and then environmental concerns. Economic shifts, a lot of us have been, reading the news. This is not surprising for many of us. E-commerce has been disrupting the retail environment for a while now. We have not had Sears around for a while, but only the last couple months have we heard closures nationwide around Kohl's, Macy's, and just today, actually, I heard that Joann Fabrics is facing bankruptcy. So e-commerce continues to shake things up. Young professionals in Massachusetts are also considering leaving Massachusetts. And it surprises me because it has so many great opportunities, but at the same time, the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce reports that 25% of young professionals from 20 to 30 years old are considering leaving Massachusetts. And that's a problem. That's a problem not just for Burlington, for Massachusetts, because this is our economic engine. This is the talent pool. This is the, quote, talent, the workforce that companies want, need. So if they're leaving, that is a problem. It's remote work also kind of allowing them to leave, but the remote work and the changing in our work patterns is also creating a lot of disruption in the standard commercial office vacancies. And again, these patterns are happening not only in Burlington, but across the nation. So in Burlington today, we have about 20% office vacancy. It's hovered over the years in this zone, 10 up to 15, but today it's up to 20%, and the forecast is up to go higher. Many of you who've been part of these processes have heard and brought to my attention, Oracle, for example, has just put on the market another 400,000 square feet of space. Businesses are becoming more selective and pruning back the space they're using. So the other thing, the preferences. Those young professionals, and given that the young professionals are leaving, what are they looking for? And what is in demand? So the demand these days in real estate is not your single occupancy commercial building out further away, another 20-minute drive, or even closer with a tough commute. People are looking for live, work, play environments. And this is not just to, it's not pie in the sky, we all want to be car free. The idea is that we want to be maybe car light, maybe vehicle light. We want to get outside the place we live or work just to do a couple of errands or activities that, kind of give us a fulfilling life, whether it's meeting a friend for coffee, going shopping, or, meeting up at a restaurant. We want to do those things, not all based on getting in our car. And so what we need to do, and what we're seeing is an uptick in demand, is for live, work, play environments. And our zoning is old. In terms of the places that have changed, we've had some great success. If we look to the left in that environment, we have the 3rd Ave environment, and then to the right, we have the district. But where we're talking about, the area for this zoning district is about 60 years old. And the third challenge that we're facing is environmental concerns. It's pretty much an unintentional consequence, the development that we've had over the last 60 years. It's created a heavy car dependency environment, which contributes to the emissions. And also the asphalt. We have almost, at least at the mall, over 2.5 million square feet of asphalt. And that contributes to heat island effects and stormwater runoff. Just a couple years ago, we had an analysis done and found that through the Vinebrook watershed, that Burlington Mall South is actually a priority improvement site to improve the sustainability and vulnerability, or actually reduce the vulnerability of Burlington's commercial corridor there. So let me talk a little bit about how we're addressing this. Our strategy, as you may have figured out, and what is our tool, because in this area, it's all private property. The town does not control any amount of this land, but we do control the zoning policies. So our strategy is to use our zoning policies and create a new mixed-use zoning district, and that's everything in the pink. This covers the properties that we just talked about, which is the Burlington Square, Kohl's, the Marketplace, which is right in here. That's where, Cookie Monster Chipotle is, Cabot Furnishing. There are a couple of these parcels that are in the district that were not picked up at the district's PDD, which is a planned development district. And then we have the most significant site, which is the Burlington Mall. This map is interesting, and if you might see some different things that we're plugging into our regulatory framework under this proposal, some stuff that you may have not seen before. It's the first time ever we're actually putting in the Vinebrook Greenway and documenting a vision that's come out of some of Concom, Larry Cohen's work of a river walk. We're documenting it now. We're saying if you're gonna build in this area, you have to contribute one way or another to the green space on your project, but also we're aspiring to create something more special here. And that's plugged into our map. The other components of our new zoning that I want to point out, which I think is really exciting because we're bringing forward some of the best practices that we've seen, not just, in Burlington, which we have some great examples, but also nationwide. We start by looking at strategic infill. This proposal is not about tearing down or converting our existing commercial. If you remember, my job is to support and strengthen our existing commercial, and that's what we're going to try to do here. The infill tries to open up opportunity in the parking lots. We don't have to cut down trees. We actually have infrastructure, utilities, and roads in this area. So strategic infill is a real thrust of this zoning. We're also combining uses. We're creating more proximity among uses to really start to create that live, work, play environment. And I think this is really interesting. I know a lot of us have feelings about bringing in new housing, but what this does is it creates a kind of a virtuous cycle of vibrancy, bringing in people here where we already have shops, jobs, restaurants, creates that buzzy, vibey feeling that where people want to be. Retailers like it because it's a built-in customer base. And we like it, I can imagine, because when we bring new investment in, we start to address some of those community concerns and benefits in terms of the Vinebrook Greenway and the open space. And that's a critical part of this strategy is to build those pieces in. And walkability, I heard it once from some planners and folks who write on this, is not just creating a sidewalk. Walkability is creating a safe, attractive pathway and network to get to other places. And that's what we're going to try to do here. And this might look familiar to a lot of you. And I said that we had it right in our backyard, a tremendous model of transformation. If you recall back, this is from 2008, in the Google Earth pictures, it used to be just an industrial park. No walkability, just drive to work, do your industrial-related maybe job, and then go home. And so with great imagination and great support from the town, we rethought how that could work. We added density. We allowed certain buildings to go up to 70 feet tall. There's an allowance for up to 150 feet tall in the 3rd Ave PDD, which is a planned unit development district that came to us by one developer because they owned all the land. What we're doing is trying to lay out a unified vision among multiple property owners to encourage the collaboration so that we can get this beyond just one property. And we're not doing this in a vacuum. And as many of you have seen, we are here. We have good office and job opportunity. The hyper green is where it's great mixed use, and they call it vibrant mixed use. And that's where we see lower vacancy, higher rents, and all around just economically healthier areas. Then we also turned to, throughout the process, have turned to our community, because this is a community-led proposal. So we have been engaging with not only our community stakeholders, we've done workshops, we've engaged property owners. We have been working together to form this. And most recently, I've had probably about, I think we had it documented on the back sheet, over the last 6 months, 33 meetings, public meetings with ZBRC, the Land Use Committee for Town Meeting, Planning Board, Select Board, Ways and Means. And throughout that process, we have been cultivating this proposal. As many of you may remember, I've been in front of you to talk about a great ambitious program that included 500 acres. Well, we definitely listened to our community and realized that might have been a little too much, and that most of the boards felt comfortable if we pruned it back. So it's now at 117 acres. And we think this is a very manageable, focused site in the area that could use the most improvement. So let me talk a little bit, because you're probably wondering, what are the details? So what are the details in your zoning packet? So I call it a packet, but it's really your warrant. And in your warrant, there are these, what Lisa mentioned, the 4 articles. And I try to put this simply. Essentially, all 4 enact the zoning district. To get us to the mixed use innovation district, we need all 4 of them. And so we have a map, we have the table of uses, we have Article 4 that's really referencing the dimensional controls, but that actually refers to the rules. So the real meat, the real chunky, interesting stuff is in Article 5, the rules. So as I mentioned, there's some great benefits in documenting where we want to see some investment in public realm, how we want to invest in strategic infill. Because I will say that we have had strategic infill. This Crate and Barrel and that guy right up there is a Citizens Bank. That's infill. But is that truly benefiting us, and is it truly benefiting the larger commercial district? No. We can do better. We can enhance it. We can make better pedestrian connections. We can allow for bigger growth here and still have it mitigated because it's close to other things. And we are working with the property owners today to make sure that this type of zoning is going to work, that it's not just complete, I guess, Pollyanna. So we have built and crafted this zoning, and that's the details in your warrant article. It's different because we offer a lot of flexibility to any property owner. We say the different types of buildings you can build, how tall they have to be, and their setbacks. We say the outdoor requirement, the outdoor amenity space has to be 20% for most development, but we'll give you some ideas of how you can achieve that. And through the process, I know we have a lot of feelings about introducing housing, and if we open up some development capacity, are we going to have too much housing? So we built in provisions that control the potential for too much housing. At this point in time, it's expressly stated in our zoning that we're not allowing office to resi or office to residential conversions. Anything non-residential, we're trying to keep. Again, my job is to strengthen our existing commercial environment. And right here, these are kind of one of the provisions we wanted to put in there right away. We also said that this is a commercially dominant area. So expressly here, we do not want the residential development to exceed 40% of the existing commercial. It has to stay a smaller portion. And then this zoning does not allow hog wild development or developments that are not reviewed. Anything that is significant related to residential development has to have a site-specific special permit from the planning board. This was from our planning staff, and this is the existing project review process from beginning to end. And it's just reminding us that the projects that are coming in have to be reviewed by our development team, have to meet the expectations, have to be, the project has to hit the capacity and be addressed through the process, and so that planning board also can look at a project and work with the developer if it needs to be mitigated in any sense before anything is built. This is just a rendering. It's an idea only. And I want to point this out. This is the coal site, and this has a lot of development on this site. This is a far out vision of probably 30 years from now. But what we're trying to do, again, is build in places that are meaningful to us. Maybe, a street that kind of can function also as a festival street. Maybe we can start to go back to that green river walk and actually connect and enhance it so that we can make it something special for Burlington. Not turn our back to a beautiful resource area, but open it up and make it an amazing amenity for our commercial district. So I do want to talk some of the fiscal impacts, some of the costs, because that's come up. So what if we did go with this process and we opened up some development? Well, we did have our consultants look at that. So Landwise is a real estate analyst firm, and John Taramuso with Landwise is here tonight with us. But we did an analysis on this area, and we did it through a demand analysis, which is typically how developers look at what can be built and what's the interest. And not surprisingly, it's not, warehouse that, is interested in building here. It's really housing and additional commercial. But even that said, we have a net positive, we have limited impacts on school, and we understand that it adds value to the existing commercial. Under their 10-year projections, there's housing demand. If all the interest of all the demand that was built, we would still come out ahead by 2.2 million at the end of 2 years. The number of residents kind of in these spaces is relatively low. The students per unit is even lower, and this is based on Burlington and regional data. We also had them look at our case study, our Third Ave, our PDD, right in town, right next door. And we looked at the values. In 2005, we had an industrial park with low value. The lighter the color, the lower the value. We changed the PDD, added retail, commercial, added residential, and in 2025, you can see the different parcels that have a stronger value, but even the ones that haven't even changed have some increase in value. And what does that mean? So if we didn't really do anything back in 25 and we just said, hey, we're good, maybe kind of stick with the status quo, that same area, based on appreciation and today's dollars, would generate about $3.2 million. Today, with the PDD, with the use changes, that same area generates $6.3 million, almost twice. So I wanted to do something very quickly here, and we're almost done, and then I'd like to have, a couple speakers come up. And this here is just some firsthand accounts. I was able to talk to some of the residents in these spaces.
Because I live 4 minutes away from my work, and I also appreciate all of the restaurants that are super close by, and being able to walk to Wegmans when it's warm out.
Hi, I'm Joel. I moved here to be closer to work. It's great because I can take the bus or walk. I work at MITRE, so it's just 2 miles away.
Love the area. It's super convenient. You feel like you're in a city without being in a city. Being able to walk to Wegmans, down the street to work out, get my nails done.
I've just moved to Burlington about a month ago. What I love about living in Burlington is it's very close to the Burlington Mall. It's a nice, peppy place. Wegman is right next to where I live.
I've been coming here for quite some time. I love this neighborhood, and I know that Bruno loves it too. He's been here for 6 years and loves it. Just everything about this neighborhood.
My friend moved in. It's closer to my work, and it's still easy to get into the city where she works, so it's a really good location, kind of easy drive and public transit everywhere.
My name is Hiral, H-I-R-A-L. Yes, where she can, it's like 5 minutes drive from here to her work, so she can go, come back, and by doing that, she's saving like at least 90 minutes, so that much time she gets with my kid.
House in Winchester, and my husband and I are living here temporarily while we look for our next home. And it's close to the mall, it's close to Wegmans, it's close to the movies, it's close to restaurants, so it's a good thing.
Thank you for giving that a watch with us. So that just kind of, I think, gives an insight into the value and that virtuous vibrancy that is built into the housing. People are living here and working here. And with that, I just want to address kind of a couple things that have obviously come up throughout the process. And one of them is the height. The height and the character has come up pretty regularly because I think it feels uncomfortable to start saying that we're moving something forward. The PDDs that have come before us, they said what they need and they said what heights they needed. We are trying to incentivize development, and so we need to really think about how tall and how feasible projects are. And if we're consolidating parking and trying to open up the space on that parking, on the parking lot and those asphalt kind of land, we need some amount of height. So the mixed use district is in this zone. This is the tallest building allowed, and that would only be for a lab building at 120 feet. And based on feedback from the planning board, we are ensuring and made it specifically clear that that 120 includes the mechanicals, which is about sometimes 15 to 20 feet on its own. Most of it would be in the 70 feet zone. And anything along the Mall Road or Middlesex Turnpike has to have a certain setback of 55 feet, much lower than what is existing. And so I wanted to show just some examples. From the top line here on the Archer, that's 70 feet. If we count the mechanicals based on Google Earth and looking at Macy's, we had got 70 feet. And so the taller building here is the Marriott. And then 120 is a bigger building. It is a bigger building. But we have design control over it. We have included the height for the mechanicals. We are not trying to achieve the multi-story kind of building without the articulation that is seen in the district. So with that, let's talk about traffic a little bit, and then we'll have Select Member Colley and thank you, Vice Chair of the Planning Board, Jess Sutherland, speak, as well as Paul Sagarino. Traffic. Traffic is always going to be a concern, and I think what we want to remind everyone, whether this project as a zoning project comes forward or it doesn't, or a project comes under the PDD, all projects have to go under review. None of them are going without the proper peer analysis, traffic studies, and to test the accommodation, whether that's sewer or road capacity. In the process, we've talked to town engineering, and mass development, or mass DOT, and they have said what's been really successful here, and that's been really helpful, has been the adaptive signs along Middlesex Turnpike. That software that speaks to one another, that optimizes the traffic flow because it has optical cameras that are looking kind of at us as we drive through it. And what it does is judge the traffic flow and help optimize it. So it may be, if you're on the short end, might have to wait a little bit, but there is a lot of traffic getting through, and that has been a very positive success and allowed for a lot of capacity on this area. We also have two things that not many people know about, but we have the I-95, there's an upgrade on the on-ramp on I-95 coming next year to help with traffic flow, as well as we secured $1 million grant to look at pedestrian and multimodal improvements on Middlesex Turnpike. And we're working with MAPC. Some of you on the Transportation Committee had worked with us, again, with or without moving some zoning forward. We need to really think about how all these kind of dead ends are contributing to the traffic on our main corridors. So if we start building better connections, we're going to see reduced traffic on these corridors, and that's the intention. So lastly, there's a couple things people have asked me, well, what if we didn't, get it all right, or if we need to make some changes? Can we do that? Of course, I would say yes, please. The zoning is a tool to achieve a future that we want. So I would definitely encourage us to make sure we are modifying it to make sure it's getting the results that we want. And lastly, if we could just kind of really think back to 65 years ago, so that this image here kind of reminds us that we were at, a pivotal point in the past. The area where the mall was excavated to help build Route 128. Route 3 was coming in, the mall road hadn't even come by. So the town leaders were kind of at a decision point to really think, much like yourselves, how are we going to prepare for the next generation? Some zoning plans were drafted, and these were to enable a new concept for the suburban regional retail environment. It was this thing called the indoor mall. And we took a chance and we did it. And it has been working for us for a long time, for 65 years. And I think at this point in time, I think what I'm asking town meeting and what we've been talking about with all the people who've contributed to this proposal to this point is that we're asking to look at this again today and really try to envision a future for the next 65 years, for our next generation. So with that, I thank you for this time. I thank you for the extended amount of attention to this presentation. It does, there's no additional presentations for any of the other articles, if that helps. But we also just wanted to invite Select Member Sarah Colley to have a few words, as well as Vice Chair Jess Sutherland.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Colley. I sit on the Select Board, and I come tonight to speak not just as a Select Board member, but as a former town meeting member who sat in on those early info sessions when the zoning area was much larger in scope, and also as a resident who attended the working groups on this and the driving tour that we went on of the area that Melissa referred to. And those experiences really showed the tremendous potential that that area holds for creating a new space that could attract people, developers, and commercial tenants. These are areas that you may drive by every day and not really think much about them or think twice, but when you view them through the lens of potential, there are vast stretches of underutilized parking, a lack of connectivity between key areas, very limited green and open space, and these are all issues that are addressed in this plan. So after I became a select board member last year, I was able to attend a joint meeting with the Burlington Area Chamber of Commerce, as well as reps from other leadership bodies in town. And the message that we heard from the business community was pretty loud and clear. They are, for lack of a better word, nervous about the future. They are seeing firsthand the empty parking lots in office buildings. They're seeing the dark windows, and they were kind of coming to us as a partner and kind of sounding the alarm, and asking for that partnership to try to help address this issue. And I don't know if anybody had a chance to see the letters. Are there letters in the back?
Of support?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so Melissa received some letters of support from some local businesses, from Simon, Brixmore, and the Broad Institute, supporting this initiative to help them prepare for the future and their ability to diversify uses. As a select board and town administration, like I said, we have very serious concerns about vacancies in the office space, which is right now at 20%. And companies that have had a very large footprint in town are right-sizing their offices for the new working environment, when leases come up. We saw that very recently with Oracle and their decision to drastically downsize. This is a complicated issue. There's no silver bullet or one-size-fits-all solution, but zoning is one tool that we have in our arsenal that can help address this issue. Companies now are seeking out markets that are experiencing growth and attracting people to work for them and fill in those offices. And the way companies attract talent needed to fill offices is by either creating or going to a space where people want to be. So these spaces are dynamic and vibrant environments where people can engage in a variety of activities and experiences. This is not just adding density for density's sake. There is a bigger picture here. It's a strategy and a framework. It's a tool to attract developers, which will in turn create an area to attract people who want to live where they work, which will then attract retail and commercial tenants who want to be where the people are, and which will in turn create revenue for the town and the community at large. So it's a synergy across stakeholders to create a lot more revenue than if we took a more passive wait-and-see approach. So this initiative aligns with Burlington's economic development goals and serves as a valuable tool for guiding development over time, allowing us to adapt to the evolving ways people live and work. It is a critical piece of the puzzle to keep our vitally important commercial tax base thriving and to help offset costs of some of the bigger budget capital projects that we have that everybody in this room is very aware of, and ultimately helping to keep taxes manageable for our residents. So I understand that change can be scary for some folks, but it is necessary. The world and the way people prefer to live and work is changing. We as a town should be taking steps to change along with it, stimulating the new growth necessary to keep the town healthy in any way we can. And I just want to thank Melissa for all of her work on this over the last couple of years. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Colley. Now, Ms. Sutherland, please.
Thank you. Just Sutherland, Vice Chair of Planning Board. I do want to make it clear, Chairman Bill Gaffney will speak for the Planning Board for the for and against positions. I simply just want to share with you all, as a business and strategy professional and somebody who has been involved in this from the start, a couple points that I think I just really want to drive home and touch upon that seem to be popular discussion areas. People always say when you get into town politics, there's always something that brings you into it. What was it? For me, it was really seeing what happened to this town 4 years ago when COVID hit. This town has done amazing things to really pull out of it, try to see some growth, but at the same time, at that point, I said, I feel like there's something that we could do better. We could really be planning, because this really showed us that we cannot be relying on so much of the same to really drive the economic vitality. And so with this initiative, as Melissa already said, there are a couple things that we've heard over and over, and I just want to readdress from my personal information. First one, traffic and character. I truly believe this is solvable. Our zoning today has been reactive, and it allows for businesses to drive their own future vision based on their goals, rather than what Burlington really wants to see. Nothing contributes more to unmitigated traffic or unappealing growth than randomness of zoning and design being planned by developers. Long-range zoning, which this is, ensures different areas are set aside for specific purposes, like homes, park revitalization, open space that we want to see, and businesses, so that everything really works together smoothly. This helps set expectations for what Burlington wants to see where and what must be provided as a benefit to our residents. In terms of how we would manage traffic and character, every project within the zoning will come before the planning board, where we have a very consistent and normal process to seek input from Select Board, Economic Development, Board of Health, Police, Fire, Engineering, Building, Conservation, and of course our beloved planning staff. They review traffic studies and/or request those if not provided, as well as mitigation plans as needed. Through this process, we can also request a peer review if we feel like we need some extra considerations. Net, it is a very thorough and comprehensive review process that will always seek to understand traffic and character implications. But this plan drastically improves that process by putting a guidebook for everybody involved, so there's no denying what the town is expecting to see built. We are continuing to hear about a lot of folks retiring from town positions, and what that leaves is a gap in knowledge, a gap in expertise. And so by having a well thought out plan that is supported by experts, it helps all of us for the future to really kind of plan for what as a town we want to see. The second item I want to touch upon is that question of if we really need this in order to maintain vitality. Many will say, but I've seen them all so busy. And honestly, thank goodness it is, because this plan is not to solve for growth today or even tomorrow. This is to look decades ahead. I may not be able to predict what industries or businesses will survive or prosper, because if I did, I would be ranking it in the stock market. But what I do know, having worked for startups and most recently a Fortune 10 business, is that everything is cyclical in the business world, because failure is part of the natural cycle of businesses. Companies are born, companies will die, which means that it is a given that industries, retail companies, and restaurant businesses are constantly going to grow and die. We need to be the most prepared for the latter, and this is exactly the genesis of this plan, to help us diversify the economic factors of our town. Being in a growth business role, I'm always monitoring the market. Just because the mall area is busy doesn't mean those owners or renters are printing money. Melissa mentioned this in her presentation, but I think it's important to restate what's happening with some businesses that take up a large footprint in this zoning area. Nordstrom last year reported slowing momentum on their net income. They also have been undergoing ownership changes as recently as December, so who knows what that will bring. Lord & Taylor site, still empty. Macy's has faced a lot of volatility, reporting significant decreases in net income each year. Kohl's, although they saw a rebound in 2021 from the pandemic, they are now consistently reporting lower net income every year the past 3 years. For context, prior to the pandemic, they reported over $1 billion in net income annually on a consistent basis. In 2022, they reported less than half that at $490 million, and then in 2023, $320 million. I'm not trying to cast fear and worry. I just want to make sure you all have a true picture of what is occurring for retailers that take up a lot of space in this particular zoning area. I'm not saying they're going to go out of business today or tomorrow, but based on the direction of these financial numbers, there's a chance that you will see empty space and diversification needed if we don't plan ahead to maintain vitality. When inevitably a new project comes around, do you want all that diversification to be built randomly without a synchronized vision, or will you get more comfortable with change to help take control of what the future of this area can be? Thank you.
Okay, now, Mr. Sagarino, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I just want to highlight a couple of the things Melissa said, but also sort of add in a little bit of my perspective. I've been working with the town for over 19 years, so 19 years of town meetings. I know there's plenty of familiar faces that have been here longer than me, but there's also a lot of new faces as well. And I did sit through, I know Melissa touched upon it, the Northwest Park PDD discussion at that time, so I've been here for the entire history of that project. And one of the things that struck me as we worked this project through the boards and committees and the public sessions is, a lot of the concerns that we heard from folks were very similar to what I remember hearing at the time about Northwest Park. It was big, it was bold, there was a lot of concern about, if we pass this tonight, is this all going to happen overnight? What's the time frame on this? And I can say that town meeting had faith in the proposal at that time, and I think 15 years later, I think we all should be really proud of what we have over at Northwest Park. It's really a shining example of a great development. And I think that the 128 Mall Road zoning change can do the same for the town. A couple of things is different here. I know that from my perspective, I've never seen a project over 2 years have so much public outreach and so many public meetings and so much input from the residents. And what we got out of that was a lot of core beliefs of things that the residents would like to get back when a developer is provided additional development opportunity. The open space, the connections, the mobility, better transportation options, better streetscapes, sidewalks, things of that nature. That all came from the residents, and that's all been inputted into this plan. Development over the years here in Burlington, the way it's worked is it's been a very reactive process. The developer tells us what they want to do, and then we react to that. And, we've been very fortunate over the years. We have first-class developers in town that have brought good projects to the town, but make no mistakes about it, that's what they want to do on the property. And our land use boards and the planning board have done a good job as they bring the projects through the process of trying to get concessions back. That would be something more what the residents would want to see. But we should always be cognizant of that this is the developer's project and this is what they want to do. This is a little bit of different tact in the zoning. We're telling the developers up front what our residents want to see back when a site gets redeveloped, whether it's, as Melissa mentioned, pathways to connect different areas, improved open spaces in natural areas, public spaces, again, better streetscapes. So all that's worked into the plan, and I know that that's a little bit different from how we've done it in the past. And again, kudos to Burlington developers, because we really do have first-class companies that do developments here in town. I guess lastly, what I would like to say is, I think the elephant in the room is the housing aspects of this, and I think, everyone will be honest and tell you the financial viability is that if this thing passes, it's likely that the housing would be the most in-demand thing to be built first. But that's not the only thing. I'm a little bit different from a lot of people in that, I'm not a housing apartment building for the sake of building an apartment building or solving the state's housing crisis. I grew up in the city, and I was dying to move to the suburbs to get to more space, a little bit more separation from my neighbors, and a driveway and all those things. And I'm sure that many of you moved to Burlington for similar things. But I truly believe that any housing that's built as a part of this will truly enhance our commercial district. It's been proven in 3rd Avenue. And I can honestly say I don't believe that the housing that's been built on 3rd Avenue has had any negative impacts on town services. And I'm just kind of curious, does anybody on town meeting live in the 3rd Avenue housing? Can I just raise a hand? All right, so the apartment people didn't come and take over local government. They're very happy living their lives down there in a different kind of way. And I truly believe that any housing that's built as part of this redevelopment will really enhance our commercial values, keep the area vibrant. And again, as the former finance person for the town, I truly understand the relationship between commercial values and residential values and the positive impact that that's had on the services that we're able to provide to the town for, what hopefully we'll be able to maintain. I know no one wants to hear a modest tax bill for our residents, and that's always been our primary goal in the town administrator's office. So I would urge your support of this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sagarino. Okay, let's go through the committees and boards who have voted on this. We'll start with the Select Board, your vote, and any further comments to be made?
The Select Board voted 5-0 in favor of this.
Planning Board.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Bill Gaffney, Planning Board. So this was not unanimous. It was actually opposed, was the majority on this one, a 4-3 vote. From the opposing team, the comments are the master plan and housing needs assessment, which town meeting members and various committees participated in, revealed that the town neither needs nor desires additional large-scale apartment developments. Burlington housing stock currently is over 30% multifamily, the vast majority of which takes form of large-scale apartment complexes. The need that was revealed through these lengthy and thoughtful processes for middle housing, condos, 2-family, 3 families, in order to repair our broken housing cycle. This proposal brings only more large-scale apartment buildings. Unlike the Third Avenue PDD, which is used as an example of what can be achieved, this proposal involves multiple property owners, which means the product will evolve in a piecemeal fashion, and the mitigation required of each property owner will also happen in piecemeal fashion. With most large-scale products such as this, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, and the planning board members who voted against this measure are concerned true mitigation cannot be accomplished in the matter. The third note is that the proposal is the first step in a multi-step plan, which, if fully implemented, will bring many units of housing to the mall area and form a multiple 6-story buildings with parking underneath. This would fundamentally change the character of the town, making it more akin to Waltham or a similar city. The planning board members have seen no evidence to suggest that what residents in Burlington believe that's the future of the town. In favor, a couple of comments. My being one of them was saying that it wasn't a full in favor because there are concerns about the height and the traffic, right? But the folks that vote in favor know that there's a future which is not big box in the mall, and that the professionals here were looking at that and said that, we think that can be addressed over time. This is very complex zoning, very difficult decision. I know folks that were in favor, again, had some concerns. Folks that were opposed understood that this was a good effort, but had some concerns on that. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. Land Use Committee. Vote and any comments? Mr. Wadilla.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Dave Wadilla, Chairman of the Land Use Committee. So we looked at these articles and considered them as a combined set for the Land Use Committee vote. We were 6 in favor, 1 opposed, nobody abstained. This is a significant piece of legislation that will affect our community for the next 50+ years. So as a committee, we've been diligent in our review, feedback, and our positions. This conversation has been going on with the Economic Development Department for the better part of 2 years. And it's easy to look at specific items that you don't like about the proposal. And even though we are voting separate articles, you really need to look at the big picture of what this does. So favorable and positive comments. This provides the ability to use this land in a more effective way and in a way that is commensurate with the current commercial developments, combining living, working, and playing. This is similar to the 3rd Avenue in the district. It'll increase our tax base. It'll maintain control over the building configurations, look and feel of the space. It will reduce the heat island effects specifying more green space, and it provides housing which is in short supply. Unfavorable comments and concerns, traffic, of course. The character of Burlington, suburbia to more like a city like Somerville type feel. Housing density, 3rd Avenue has something like 400 units. This has 750 units. And did we ask too little from the future development of this? Okay, that's it from land use. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wadilla. Zoning Bylaw Review Committee. Ms. Ellis, your swan song.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Shari Ellis, Chair of the Zoning Bylaw Review Committee, and as a reminder and information for new folks, so the charge of our committee is to really vote on the language that is before us as a committee members. As town meeting members on the committee, we can voice our opinion for the concept or whatever, but as far as the committee vote goes, it's really strictly on the language, and if it's approved by town meeting, are we happy with that language going into our bylaws? And for all 4 articles on this, we voted 6-0 in favor. Thank you.
Thank you. Conservation Committee. Yes, could we have one microphone on each of these 2 aisles, please?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Bill Boyven. I'm Vice Chair of the Conservation Commission. The Conservation Commission doesn't usually have an authority to make comments on zoning articles, but we felt strongly enough in this case that we voted on a letter of support, and I'm going to read that right now. As written, this mixed-use zoning proposal would have significant positive potential environmental impact. The rezoning stipulates that each individual developer must include 20% green space in their plan if they stay within the design guidelines, 15% for the one type of building, a lab building. Currently, there's 117 acres in the zone, of which just about exactly half is impermeable black asphalt. And this creates a massive heat island. There's currently no stormwater treatment. Runoff from all of that asphalt just sheet flows off the site, carrying pollutants directly into Vine Brook. In the summer, this water runoff can be at a very high temperature, adverse to the aquatic life in the brook. Any increase in green space and shade would greatly help this situation. The proposed zoning plan also includes walkways to increase pedestrian connectivity and a Vine Brook greenway. We feel that all of this will have a positive impact on the environment and the connectivity of the area. For these reasons, the Conservation Commission voted unanimously 4-0 to support the positive environmental features of the rezoning initiative. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Boyven. Did Ways and Means take a vote on this, Mr. Davison? No. I think that covers all the committees of note. So now we will open it up for a discussion from the body. Comments, questions? None? You've got the floor. Right here. Chris Hartley, to your left. Right there.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Chris Hartling, Precinct 3. So, question for the Select Board, and then Melissa, a question for you. The question for the Select Board is, what kind of communication have we had with the mall about what their plans are? I know that's something that has always been a topic of conversation. What's the mall want to do? Is anybody talking to the mall? Are they disclosing where they think things are going? Question for Melissa. How'd you come up with 40%? And would there be a cap? And I ask the question only because, and if I'm wrong, I think the commercial would be taxed as commercial property and the residential part of it would be taxed as residential. If it was taxed as residential, is that just based on square footage? Is it based on density like the commercial? So how'd you come up with 40? Is there a cap on what percentage of that would be affordable? It looks like there's a 15% minimum. Is it all rental? Would some of it be ownership. So I'll start with that, and then maybe we can build off of that. But primarily interested in how you came up with 40% and what percent of it would be affordable. And I'd love to know where the mall's at and where they are on this.
Ms. Tintaklis.
Mr. Moderator, yes, the mall representatives have been part of this process since day one. We've been working with Tim Fox in Indianapolis, that's the headquarters. They've been out at physical meetings and online. There's a letter of supportiveness. I think this has been a process of kind of trying to strike the balance of their plans and what we want. They've said that to this day they have not provided any master plans or documents beyond that. Their interest has been looking at the future. They told us that the malls today, the ones that there is a bifurcation in malls, the successful malls and the not successful malls. And the malls that are able to adapt are the malls that are surviving. And there's a letter in the back from Simon Property. In terms of affordability, we have the standard inclusionary rate, which is 15% on any housing. If the density and the requirement is higher, then it is 20%, and they would have to propose that to Planning Board. The other piece was the ownership. Unfortunately, we cannot control ownership or rentals through zoning. So that is more of a negotiation, talking to developers up front in terms of the product type. And that's partly why in that process review, talking to staff early and often is part of the process. And the 40%, thank you. I have that here. The 40% was based on best practices, having part of my job is working with NIOP and ULI, companies where the commercial real estate developers meet. And the idea was born out of also a lesson learned from the town center. So if you recall, one idea that was approached was considering a balance based on a whole district. But then what happens is there's kind of a feeding frenzy of who can get the housing first. So the approach to control any housing appetite was to then do it by project or development site. So they have to show us what the plan is, and it has to not only include up to 40%, but it has to retain the existing commercial. We're not looking for them to do the conversions. So I think one thing that came out of the community process was concern that, for instance, Lord and Taylor would get converted into a residential unit, so that the stipulation in our zoning says that is not what we want. Our first line, or our first tactic, our first strategy is to build infill, and you show us how you're going to do that so we can strengthen our existing commercial.
Mr. Sagarino, I believe there was a question on, has the town been in contact with the mall?
Mr. Moderator, I think Melissa did address that as part of her answer.
Okay. Mr. Glantz.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Nolan Glantz, Precinct 1. Somewhat related, but a couple more follow-up questions on this. So, I remember very well the town center, and as you said, very first thing that happened, we wanted all this redevelopment. It was going to be all nice and just like Lexington Center. And the first thing that happened was all the allowed housing got permitted, and all of a sudden we had to say, whoa, 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 what about the rest? There was no rest, so we stopped the housing, and that was that. That's all we got, and ever since. That was 20 years ago. So trying to read through this, looking for stipulations for any kind of quid pro quos, and the only thing I found was if they go denser than the regular multifamily density, to go more dense in terms of a building that they build, then they have to provide improvements to the site. Although there isn't specifics on that, it'll be up to, I guess, the planning board. But what requirements are there, or if not, I think we need to add requirements for, even if they go with a lower density, because 40% is a lot. The mall, I just looked it up, is 1.2 million square feet, and if the mall is a project, they can add 500,000 square feet of new housing, new apartments. They can add 500 apartments or 500 units on the mall site as it is right now, with no say whatsoever about any greenway or improvements or whatnot, as far as I'm reading this right. So hopefully I'm wrong, but if not, I think this needs to be addressed because we got burned last time. I don't want to get burned again.
Ms. Timtakos, any comment on that?
Mr. Moderator, thank you. Yes, so the intention of this zoning is to strengthen the existing commercial. So I'll reiterate that only because the intention in the past on the overlay for the town center was the hope for redevelopment and kind of a tear down of the commercial to build up the commercial with housing on top. The strategy here for the mall area is a little different. So we are understanding that the demand for housing is almost kind of insatiable at this point, right? We know there's shortages. People in the real estate market have told us that there is a high demand. So we know that that will likely be the first project. And part of the benefit of having worked on this project for 2 years and having worked with the property owner reps, we understand what the constraints are for the mall. So beyond the 40% that limits it to about the 500 mark, what we understand is there are, they call them REIs, which is reciprocal easement agreements, which are contracts with all the tenants in that mall. And so they have say over the parking lot and where things can go. In addition, there is, for retailers, they generally like surface parking lot. So it is actually harder for us, being Burlington and having the mall that is rather successful than a dying mall, to create the incentive that we want. And I think that's why we've had some trouble trying to build in some of the elements that we've been wanting, because they've sat kind of content where things are at for the mall. But that's why it's been important for us to be in partnership and understand their constraints with their tenants and what they're interested in doing and how they're moving forward. We've worked with their research team also that researches kind of where malls are kind of in the direction they're going. So what we're learning now at this point under this zoning, that most likely the mall, Simon Mall, is interested in some project around the kind of a hotel or commercial project. And that is looked at in the area that is less utilized with the parking by the mall where the circus is. And that's one thing we know. So I think there's a concern around the housing, but because of the limits and because of the REAs, the one other project that we've heard about that could be under this zoning would be around the mall, the Macy's property. And so those are two things that I would anticipate, to be very frank with you, for moving this forward, that would likely come to us, that we would go under through the process and planning board would be considering over the next, I would imagine, 5 to 10 years.
A comment from town council?
I think we should point out also that it isn't only ones who have, is in proposed developments who want more dense projects to require a special permit where all of the amenities have to be provided. It's any application that falls under the new construction, additions, or any new use or change of use within the district. So any application has to comply with the design standards. And then on top of that, if you are asking for more dense projects and require a special permit, there's another layer.
Thank you. Yes.
Yes, follow up, Mr. Glantz.
Thank you. So to follow, and I did see the increased density requiring so the building that they build will have to be along these new design standards. That's great. But to turn, so what they could do, if I'm reading it right, is add a nice looking hotel building and or apartment building on, near, or adjacent to Macy's without needing to do any of the other nice greenways and walkabilities and all the other amenities that we put in there. Those are all we wish they would do, we suggest that they do, we want them to do. It's in our vision and our desire, but it's not required. The only thing required is to do the building in accordance with the guidelines, but as far as converting the site to look like the pictures, it's not required. It should be, but it's not.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I disagree.
Mr. Antokolos.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The design standards are a requirement for the development. So the trees, the beltways, the open space, they can achieve it in different ways. So again, we're creating more flexibility for property owners to give us our ideas, but we have put up the guardrails for what that looks like. So we have guided them to include the 20% open space, the trees, not only in the curb, in the street core connections, but also to the parking lots as well. So a significant redevelopment would require the design standards to be met.
Mr. Lieber. Come on, gents, let's move the microphones quickly.
Hi there, Blaze Lieber, Precinct 3. Precinct 6. Sorry. There's been a lot of talk about, the changing character of Burlington and if this would change the character of the town. Well, I think the character of the town's already changing because every time I see a small Cape house go up for sale, it gets demolished and a giant, 3,000 square foot, $2 million house goes up in its place. So these smaller, affordable, starter homes are disappearing from Burlington. And, when I moved to Burlington, I didn't have $30,000 to put down on a house. So I lived in an apartment, and I liked the town so much that after I saved up enough money, I did buy a house. But if there's not housing for, young people, young professionals, young families, then no young people or no new people want to come to this town unless they already have a load to spend on a huge house that was built where a small one used to be. So just something to consider, I guess, going forward.
Thank you. Mr. Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Roger Bell, Precinct 6. I noticed from the original material that we received for the backup and in the original warrant, there were noticeable changes going forward. And I was wondering if you, because there was a separate article sent out by Amy to town meeting members, so I was wondering if you might address what were the significance of why the changes had to be made, or what was involved in making those changes for the current warrant.
I'm getting a comment from town council that they think you're confusing it with the ADU warrant article. Roger, could you check that, please?
Mr. Moderator, we've only had one submission to town meeting. So I think there was the other one related to the ADU that is forthcoming on the warrant tonight.
Mr. DiTucci.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Dan DiTucci, Precinct 6. Well, at least you got an A+ for the presentation. With the new zoning, would that allow lab space on the property? Like, for instance, we're talking about, Lord & Taylor, and if any of those other stores, go belly up. Will this change? Right now, I don't think you can put lab space in the mall now, but would this zoning make it so some of these retailers, especially Macy's, could they put in lab space?
Mr. Antokolos.
In terms of the use, if it met all the requirements by the special permit, it could by special permit.
To have lab space in where there's shopping and then there's fooderies and stuff. I don't think that this project solves the problem of the 20% vacancy in commercial. It doesn't solve the problem of getting people to go back to work. So if people don't want to go back to work, what will happen with the office spaces? It'll either stay stagnant or it'll just go up a little bit. I know I went to one meeting and I know that we talked about the total number of units, apartment units, is at, say, 750 units. Now, there's about 5 or 6 pieces of property here that are all going to be getting primarily the same zoning, all within the same time. So so this zoning, it's like hitting the button, and all 5 of these parcels that we talked about all get the zoning immediately. So who's going to divvy up the 750 units? What if the mall decides they want to put in 750 units? Can they put in that many? Because I know the Kohl's space would not be able to accommodate that because of the development thing you talked about. But could the Burlington Mall get all 750 spaces?
No.
And how would that, because it's got to do with a percentage of what? Tell me why they can't, or tell me how many units they can get.
Based on how the commercial to residential provision is written, they could only have 40% of the existing commercial square footage, gross square footage, which would be approximately, I think we looked at it in the FAQ handout, is about 525. I don't have it right in front of me, but it's a percentage of the existing. So that would be the max number available on the site. In addition, the height could not be exceeded. They would have to get a site-specific special permit from Planning Board, and they would have to meet all the design guidelines and the bonuses and the commitment to the town for the bonus.
Yeah, that's okay. That's fine. That's about 70% of the units can go there. Now, question. People do know here that Macy's owns their own store. People know that. Does everybody understand that they also own a large percentage of the parking lot? Can you, for instance, say, so everybody, just in case people don't understand, it's not like a common area like in a condo. You know, you own your unit, but you share in the rest of it. So that being said, what if Macy's comes forward then they have nothing to do with Simon's, because I'm not even sure what they're paying Simon's, maybe just to take care of the building and stuff. So my question to you is, what if Macy's wants to come forward with units also, apartment units? Does that cut into the 500? Does it include the 550 that you talked about?
Yes.
Okay.
Madam, or Mr. Moderator, through you. So correct, the Macy's is its own property. It has, again, like the agreements in collaboration with Simon. So when we've been talking to Simon, the mall, we have been talking to the reps for Lord & Taylor that have a ground lease. We've been talking to the owners of Macy's, the head property reps of Macy's, as well as Simon. Simon now owns Sears. They had acquired that.
Right.
So I think the question is on the unit count for residential. So that 525 is total for the site. And so if Macy's or Simon had decided to do that, that is the max amount that could be built on the site. Then we have constraints, as I mentioned, on height and density, so that's where it would limit it. The mall has constraints with these reciprocal easement agreements and long-term leases, and they don't control Lord & Taylor.
Okay. Just once again, a point of clarification. On Macy's, based on the square footage that they have, their building, which we're not going to include that into the square footage of the mall. Nolan had just brought up a point about the total square footage of the mall, but when he brought up that point, that cannot include Macy's. So do you have any idea how much of the square footage is at the Burlington Mall without Macy's? Because that will have a bearing on how many units they can have.
Mr. Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So in the zoning, there's a provision that the outset that defines a development site and calls out the parcels in the mall as one site, so that there is not, you know, a way to divvy up, I guess, the housing, so that it's considered one site.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I just don't know how I want to vote on it. This is what, 10 years out, 20 years out?
The demand that we're looking out, I would say, from based on our fiscal impact, was a 10-year projection that we've looked at. And then the two projects that we could anticipate, probably we've heard directly from Kohl's and RK Centers, who controls it. They have no current plans for redevelopment. Linear, they are happy with the more options for tenanting their space. That's where the Chipotle is. And they are not planning for any redevelopment. They are happy. There also is the Burlington Marketplace that used to be the Old Tower Records, currently under renovation. They're currently investing for the Tate and Cava that's coming in. And so they are no further plans at this point for them. So it's really kind of looking at the mall site that we'd anticipate in probably the next 5 years, you know, a project or two.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Asher.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Kate Asher, Precinct 4. Melissa, thank you. I support this proposal. I just want to speak on behalf of, like you said, you mentioned pedestrians, you know, many times, and this is pedestrian friendly. And I just want to comment and bring up the idea of safety for pedestrians. And when I look at the 3rd Ave area, they look like they've done a lot of good things around that with, you know, the roundabout. Also in the Blue Sky Drive, there's the speed bumps. In the district area, there's the speed table. But with, you know, issues like this, like bollards along the sidewalks, speed tables, roundabouts, and also with crossings, say across the Mall Road, or even from, like, you know, this new development to, you know, like Barnes and Noble and this kind of thing. You know, what can you do? What's built into this? Where is the influence? What can we do? But I think, you know, this is a pedestrian friendly, that's a big push in this, and I just want to raise that issue. So appreciate any comments.
Mr. Douglas.
Mr. Moderator, so I think that's what we heard primarily from the community, is about the walkability. And I think that's why, you know, this zoning is important, in that it pushes forward and it says up front what needs to be part of their project. So in the zoning, there are some small street networks with those green lines, and you'll have it in your packet in the map. I'm going to just turn there because it might be easier. And so you can start to see some of these lines. Those are trying to give some orientation for the future infill. And that's where they'll be responsible to make sure there's the connections. There's also the influence from, you know, the town staff, our planning director, as they worked and they come in through the project. To let them know what is, you know, obviously important to us. Some of the bigger infrastructure projects, depending most likely kind of on the size of, you know, what comes in. The bigger the new, you know, private investment, the more we can, you know, negotiate and the impact and the mitigation. But typically speaking, what the other thing that we can do once the zoning is in place is also leverage that with the state. So we've been successful in even anticipating us taking a step forward. We were able to secure the $1 million for the Middlesex Turnpike, looking at pedestrian safety. And we're submitting for the Vinebrook Greenway. And it's because we have it documented. It's because we're working toward it. So not all of it, obviously, can happen from the first project, but it helps us provide a roadmap to do so. So I hope that helps.
Mr. Sachs.
John Sachs, Precinct 7. Couple things strike me. One is the Third Ave development has added a lot of apartments, and it's surprising to me how you go over there to shop or whatever. There doesn't seem to be a lot of traffic. It does not seem to be a problem. A friend of mine lives over on the huge corporate drive where they built this enormous wooden apartment building, just enormous, and a lot of the residents were freaked out. My God, it's like, I don't know how many units over there. There was no noticeable increase in traffic. I don't know what those people do, but it doesn't seem to be a problem. Now, Mr. Sagarino pointed out that nobody from Third Ave is in town meeting, and that's actually been a concern to me that, you know, we have a lot of people living in apartments and they don't take part in town business, and I don't think that's good. I haven't figured out how to deal with it. But those folks are living over there at Third Ave in apartments, and they seem happy, and it doesn't seem to be hurting anybody's life. Now, the question came about the quality of the town. I mean, the town is basically a suburban town, and I moved here for that. I can have my little suburban house with my shop down in the basement where I build my weirdo sculptures, and in my front lawn where I put them out there. So far, the neighbors haven't revolted too much. But the thing is, that's me. I cannot imagine at this point living in an apartment because I'm not that kind of guy. Someday I will. I mean, I can't, you know, I'm going to get older. But the point is, there's a lot of younger people other people that do want to live in an apartment, right? And as this fellow pointed out, they can't probably afford to move into what's going on. I bought my house for $300,000 and some odd thousand. It's pushing up, getting close to $1 million, which is absurd for that rat hole that I live in. But that's what it is. So I'm in favor of this. Yeah, the quality of the town is going to change, as he pointed out. It's changing no matter what we do. But I think this is an extremely well thought out plan. And the energy level that she described, it's happening at Third Ave, where they have music outside and they have stuff going on. That's good stuff. And I don't see why we wouldn't want to have more of it.
Thank you, Mr. Sachs. I saw some hands down here. Mr. Hardy.
Thank you. Mike Hardy, Precinct 1. Melissa, when you made the comparison to Northwest Park, I think this mixed development's kind of different because in Northwest Park, as you said, you had the whole industrial businesses, and those basically, I think, you know, in some areas anyways, just got knocked down, and new commercial buildings came in, and some hotels and that type of thing. But for the mixed development around the mall area, we're not saying they're going to knock down any of the existing commercials.
Right.
So they're just doing infill development, and I'm kind of getting the impression that most of the infill development is going to be some type of housing versus new commercial shopping and that type of thing. So can you just maybe explain or give your vision? What do you foresee coming in terms of how much new commercial revenue type of projects we get? So, for example, I think a hotel would be adding to our commercial tax base, but something like condos and things that people buy, that would not, right? So how do you kind of, do you have a vision on how that's going to kind of play out in terms of us seeing that growth in commercial?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Yes, so I think, you know, like we're talking about, I think it's, I I call it the virtuous cycle of vibrancy, right? So, having people in, creating the housing does create more of a built-in kind of customers for our retailers and our restaurants. So that is the one component of it. I think when we're looking at the development, and we did the fiscal impact analysis with Landwise, who is also here, and if there's more details to that, we can, have John come here. But essentially, the analysis understands that most likely the residential would come into play that is taxed at a lower rate. Even if it's an income generating property, even if it's owned by a REIT, they are all always taxed at a residential rate. So that has been factored into the fiscal impact. And that is also happening at 3rd Ave. So that is also taxed at a residential rate. I think, in my opinion, something like, a high-end facing, hotel is what has been talked about through this process, would be a very strong additive project to this area, because we have the hotel and meals tax in addition to that, as well as the commercial property tax. And then as we look at that, we had built that into the fiscal impact analysis as well. So I don't know if that, completely answers it, but in terms of understanding the costs associated with additional housing and the revenue that comes in, still looking at a 10-year projection, we are in the net positive of the 2.2 million. So that's how we've kind of understood it at this time.
Mr. DeBona up the back.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Rich DeBona, Precinct 3. Melissa, I'm impressed by the amount of work and the direction of this initiative. Thanks for all your hard work. As expected, there's a focus on a number of the positive benefits to be expected. My concern relates to the unintended consequences, such as the impacts to our infrastructure, things like water, or the impact on schools with the residents. So I'm not suggesting we not pursue the plan. Rather, I'd like to see a more balanced evaluation of these impacts as we move forward. And one other point, minor point maybe, but is there an expectation that the 40% residential folks will not own cars, or is that also going to add to traffic? But I don't need an answer to that. Just fold it in later on.
Further questions? Ms. Warren. Then we'll get to Mr. Rutfield.
Thank you, Chris Warren, Precinct 4, through the moderator. Thank you, Melissa, for all your hard work on this plan. I wish it didn't include the 3 properties that are near Lexington Street and near the residence, Precinct 7, Precinct 3, particularly with 70-foot residential and 120 commercial. Those are multi-story. I think right now those properties work. The Staples Plaza, the Kohl's, and the Burlington Marketplace is because they're 1-story, and it doesn't impact anybody's view. I would also be very concerned about the traffic on Lexington Street and I guess it's Meadow Road, where there's a lot of wetlands and it tends to flood. So I wish that those 3 properties were not part of this plan. Thank you.
Mr. Rutfield, and we'll get to Ms. Byer.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Alex Rutfield, Precinct 5. So regarding some of the concerns from the planning board, was there any consideration to add incentives to build condos and townhouses instead of apartments? And if so, what were they? And if not, why not?
Ms. Tintakoulis, can you answer that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. So In the zoning proposal, townhouses are allowed as a development project. If you turn to your building types, you can see in there that that would be an allowed building type. But through the process and how we understand kind of the land economics of these areas, it's more likely for the type of investment when we're trying to seek here that it would be more of a larger mixed use or multifamily house, kind of building. Similar again to the size of the 3rd Ave, Huntington, and Tremont. And so it's not that it's not being considered. I think it becomes just the issue on the higher, better use on implementing middle housing. That is people in planning, professionals like myself, it is one of the harder types of properties to build given the cost. As town meeting member John Sachs said, once you're buying a property at a certain cost, that you're developing, what your cost basis and how you build on top of that factors into the product that you're either selling or renting. So I think I'm just trying to be transparent in what we expect would come under this zoning, and what we've heard from the property owners is likely to be a feasible project and still achieve some of the community benefits that would come from that type of development.
Ms. Byer. And we'll get to Mr. Pearson over here.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Kathy Byer, Precinct 2. I love the vision with the beautiful buildings and the landscaping, and I think that would be fantastic. I think that would work really well. I like what has happened at 3rd Avenue. But every time I hear talk about infill with the Burlington Mall parking lot, I think of what has recently happened with the Woburn Mall, with the shops out in the front. You go there, first of all, they did build a big apartment building. Supposedly it's walkable. Parking is extremely difficult, even at Market Basket, and I have nightmares that you could end up with a project like that. And so what I don't understand is, this is just me, I'm in favor of this moving forward. I'm really nervous about how it's going to roll out and how the committees in town are going to be able to exercise any sort of good planning. There's no master plan for that area. The zoning's there, but there's not a master plan. So however that's going to roll out, if you have any ideas that there's better control over it so we don't end up with the Woburn Mall, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Toklas, a comment?
Yes, the site plan review will consider kind of the parking and in terms of making sure that the requirements are met, and that is part of the review process. With respects to the Woburn Mall, I think it has also been, this is now my commentary more so, but a victim of its own success, right? Before it was failing and we had reports, so I did reach out to Woburn as well to understand kind of the commercial impacts. And I can give you a little kind of color to it, but it's only partly. I hadn't analyzed it entirely, but the report from the city of Woburn was that initially that commercial was generating about, this is just based on the tax revenue, $200,000. Today it generates $800,000 every year. So in terms of the success and the value of the commercial, it has gone up significantly. Now the trouble with the parking and some of the access immediately up front to some of the commercial, which I have heard, so through our community process, that one has come up several times. How would we ensure that is it meeting our parking requirements and going through a site plan review? So they have to lay out their plan to staff, to planning board to show how they're meeting the design standards and meeting kind of the parking requirements. So that is, that is part of this process under the zoning.
Mr. Sinesi. Oh, no, excuse me, sorry. Mr. Pearson, I said we'll go to. Then we'll go across the aisle.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Monty Pearson, Precinct 3. I've been on the Land Use Committee now for 12 years, and one of the basic principles that we have followed, and the reason our committee supported this 6-1, is that we have wanted to encourage enrichment and redevelopment of the commercial area on both sides of 128 and along Route 3. And by doing that, been able to resist attempts to do any kind of large-scale development in the residential neighborhoods in the rest of the town. And I think that I'd like to point out that the number of people who have moved into the 3rd Avenue development has not really affected people in the residential areas around town. And that is because the focus of people who move into apartments like that, you saw that people they're young people or they're older people. They don't usually have kids because the apartments are too small to really put in a family. 1,000 square feet is not, 5 or 6 kids. And so those people are interested in the commercial district, they're interested in the movie theater, they're interested in the restaurants. Their focus then remains in that commercial district. And I think that what this proposal is doing, there are little parts of it that we could change, but we have to remember that what we're trying to do is to enhance one part of town, which is the part of the town that enhances the golden egg. And that golden egg needs to adjust and move forward. It can't just remain the way it was 50 years ago. And there may be things in this that we need to change later on, but we can do that. Each year we come by and do little adjustments to it. But this opens the door for us to kind of enter a new era where we're making improvements and making adjustments and allowing the developers to move ahead. And remember, if we don't have this kind of proposal, then we have to fall back on what's there now. And what's there now is zoning that looks backwards into a commercial and residential and retail world that doesn't exist anymore. So I think that we need to be opening the door and walking through and trying this rather than holding on to what we had in the past, because things like that evaporate after a while. And once you enter a cycle of decay, then it's very much harder to bring that back. So before we get into the situation where we're desperate, let's move ahead now. Thank you.
Mr. Sinesi.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Adam Sinesi, Precinct 1. Move the question.
The question has been... Yes, Ms. Saltman, yes.
107. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Myrna Saltman, Precinct 2. After this vote, can we please have a little timeout? Thank you.
The Myrna minute.
We can talk about it, Myrna. All right. We have 4 articles that are we've been lumped together in the discussion. 3 of them require a simple majority. With your permission, I would like to vote those all together.
You have to call the question. You have to vote the question. He moved the question.
Well, okay. So Article 2 has been moved and seconded. Article. Oh. I'm trying to get this done. Sorry. I'm rushing the question. All right. All those in favor of moving the question, it's a 2/3 vote. Thank you. All those opposed? I see 3 people opposed, 4 people. It's clearly a 2/3 majority. Okay, now back to what I was saying. We've got 4 articles all wrapped together. I'd like to vote the three of them that require a majority as one, if I could have such a motion. And could I get a second? Discussion on that? Questions on it? Yes, Mr. Glantz.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Noel Glantz, Precinct 1. Could I suggest a request that we do the one that requires 2/3 first, which will let us know whether we might wind up in the middle ground of between 50-50 and 2/3 or something like that? Because that's the one that's going to require the vote and the debate.
I understand, but I'd like to get the three out of the way if we could.
Article 2, 4, and 5.
So, I would like to call for a vote on Articles 2, 3,
Nope, 2, 4, and 5.
2, 4, and 5. 2, 4, and 5. All those in favor? You're voting on Articles 2, 4, and 5.
As one.
As one
Vote.
vote. Okay? So you agree to do that? All right. Now, could I get some counters? Because we're going to go straight to a standing count on these zoning articles.
How about if somebody organizes it?
If we could get two people in this aisle to split it and someone else to take this side.
And then she can go over to the far side. Are you going to do them all together? They should do those two first, and then this one.
Okay, you got it set? We have 4 people who can count? All right. All those in favor of Articles 2, 4, and 5, please stand. Well, guess I called this wrong.
You did good. How much? 16. 9.
Thank you. All right, you can sit down. All those opposed, please stand. We'll do this one more time. Six, 10. I got 91 to 15. Is that right? There being 91 in favor, 15 opposed, those 3 articles pass. Now let's vote on Article 3, please, and we'll do the same thing again. Standing count, please. All those in favor, please stand. Thank you.
One at a time. 8? Okay.
18, 36, 41, 6, 7. Yeah. Okay, all those, sit down, please. All those opposed, please stand. I got 91-14.
91-14.
There being 91 in favor, 14 opposed,
Wait a minute, I'm talking too much.
that article passes. Congratulations, Melissa.
Thank you, town meeting. I'm really looking forward to working with everyone on the future of this. Thank you.
And you're buying tonight, is that correct? Doesn't hurt to ask. Okay. Let's,
Oh, you can give Myrna her break.
okay. Myrna, there's 107 people here, and let's take a couple-minute break. Stretch your legs.